let's talk Cats. Um, as y'all said, last season it was a little bit of a disaster. What went wrong, gentlemen, as far as you're concerned? Where did things go wrong last year?
Uh, that's a long list. So, I mean, I think a couple things. I don't think the the offensive coaching was really bad. I mean, to be blunt, it just there was no
As
cohesive.
bad as it gets.
Yeah, it was bad. You got injuries on the offensive line. The schedule didn't do any favors for Arizona. Maybe I think we kind of overstated the personnel a little bit in terms of depth, not the starting guys, but the overall depth. And then it kind of just a couple guys got injured, then more guys got injured, and then it snowballs, and it's just reached a point where it's like, okay, when is the season gonna end?
Yeah, it was a coaching staff that was in over its head. Maybe they're better this year. Hopefully, they can't be any worse. But they were in over its head. You had a quarterback in Noah Fafita that would snap the ball at the 4 yard line on like first and goal, and he would end up throwing it from the 17 every single time. You had the best wide receiver in college football. And you didn't really know what to do with him other than just throw the ball up as a Hail Mary. It was bad. There was no other way to put it. And when you're like 10 games into the season and the coaches ask, "What's your identity?" or "What are you trying to do?" and he says, "I don't know." That's yeah, it was bad. It was bad. It's just, again, been a decent off season. So again, we're trying to have a open frame of mind, but it was as bad. It was as bad a coaching performance I've ever seen.
What, in y'all's opinion, is the biggest question on y'all's mind going into fall camp?
To me, it's what the offense is going to look like. I mean, it was very clearly the problem last year. They fired the offensive coordinator, Babers. They fired the co-offensive coordinator, brought in Seth Nagy, who's going to run an air raid type of deal. But they lost T-Mac and they rebuilt the offensive line. And so to me, the question is, what is that offense going to look like? Will it be good enough to steal some wins? Because last year, once another team scored like 28 points.
Yeah. Oh, it was over. Yeah.
Game was over.
Yeah, no, it was done at that point. The other thing too with is they made a lot of bad personnel decisions, but on the offensive line, you had three guys who were really really good, and basically you decided to change how you blocked. They ran off two players that would have been their best player probably on the entire defense. Shear agreed with running them off. And that was obviously a wrong decision on Shear's part. Keep in mind the guys that they ran off. One guy was a starter at Texas this past year. Couldn't start at Arizona, but could start at Texas. And the other guy was Big Ten Player of the Week at least once, maybe twice. So, yeah, not great, bad year.
Yeah. They happen. They happen. I think though, you mentioned T-Mac. I think for every outsider looking in at Arizona, the biggest question has to be, how do you replace a guy like T-Mac? And, I feel like most of our teams, we've had some great receiver within the last decade that we're like, oh my God, how are you going to replace him? And usually it's by committee. How do y'all see, because Fafita's going to be back, but who's he going to throw to? That's the question. Who's he going to throw to? How do y'all answer that question?
They rebuilt the room. They brought in a freshman, Isaiah Mizell. I like the biggest thing is they brought in a few transfers. I really like Chris Hudson. They brought him in from Washington State.
He likes Buffalo's spot in Compton too. We had him on the show.
Buffalo
He's a big fan.
Big fan of him. They brought in Trey Spivey from Kansas State, and they brought in a bunch of wide receivers. Luke Wysong from New Mexico. So these guys put up numbers. They're returning Chris Hunter. So they rebuilt the room. I actually think the room has better depth than it did last year. It's just who's going to be that number one guy, and what's the offense going to look like when T-Mac's not there. But in terms of depth and quality, to me they added a few good players that I think are going to contribute right away.
I actually think the offense is going to be better. You had a guy last year. You had an OC that had no clue what he was doing. Literally none, like less than none. I mean, Clint, you, me, and Shear could go out there and probably have a better idea. He sucked. He was terrible. You bring in Seth Nagy. He's got a nice little background. I think he's a guy that knows what he wants to do, which is a huge step forward from what they had this past season. I think the offensive line, I think is that's a real question mark. But the skill position players, I'm okay with. Like Shear said, the receivers I think are decent. I think the running back room is pretty nice. The O-line, though, I have no clue about. We are going to find that one out. Generally, you don't get better losing a first-round pick and then losing a kid to Tennessee that's going to start and a center. We will find out, though.
Yeah, we have that in common. TCU,
Yeah.
I'm really not sure what the offensive line is going to look like next year, and I think we'll go as the O-line goes.
Yeah.
Well, Fafita, you have to feel good at least about having him back, if nothing else, and, regardless of what the offensive coordinator is going to do. Where do you think he realistically ranks now that you've spent a year in the conference? Where do you think Fafita ranks among Big 12 quarterbacks going into 25?
I still think he's near the top. Really like, it sounds like Mike's joking, but he's really not. I mean, they fired Babers as OC, like 3 games into the year.
Yeah.
Then they replaced him with Matt Atkins, and neither of them had experience working with a quarterback. And so they bring in Daggy, who's got quarterback experience, who clearly knows how to run an offense. That was the biggest too. The play calling was always like you could call it out before they even ran the play. So I just find it hard to believe that Noah went from really good one year to really bad the next year. I don't think he's the best quarterback in the conference, but I think he's closer to the top than he is maybe the bottom like he was last year.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think that the big thing with Noah that didn't happen is Noah's tiny. Noah's about 5'7". And with Noah, he's a cerebral guy. He's got to be able to get the ball out early. Last year Arizona didn't do that. He was holding on to the ball forever. And by the end of the year, you could tell that he was just kind of coaching himself out there. It didn't really look like there was anything going on. Like I said, at the end of the day, I think they've done some good things. I think they've rectified some things, but it was coaching malfeasance of the highest order this past season, offensively, especially. It was as bad as I've ever seen. So I think Noah Fafita is a good quarterback. I think he'll bounce back, assuming the offensive line is decent.
Well, so how about the defense? How do you feel about the defense going into this year?
That's another thing. I mean, it's tough. They lost some good players, but at the same time, the lack of depth last season was killer. And the thing is, like, a lot of the guys they brought in are from small schools, and so there's always a look, like they bring in a D lineman and a linebacker from Northwestern State, and they like these kids. But the problem is Northwestern State went 0-12 and had one of the worst defenses in the country. So it's like, are they actually good, or were they good on a horrible defense? And until we find out the question on that, it's hard to say. I think the depth will be better at certain positions. Like I think the secondary is going to be great. I just have questions about the lines, really. The offensive line and the defensive line are by far the biggest questions on this roster.
Yes. The defensive line is I don't know who's going to rush the passer. Now, again, they like a guy like Chase Kennedy. Chase Kennedy is also the size of Noah Fafita, so you don't really, I'm just kidding, about 205 pounds, but maybe not that far off, actually. But
they got Tia Savea, your boy.
Yeah, Tia Savea back, another guy that went to Texas, but unfortunately, Tia Savea is not nearly as good as the one that we ended up losing. The line is a massive question mark. I think the secondary is going to be pretty solid, but the line is a massive question mark. You got a lot of guys that just weren't good last year. Shear is a huge fan of Chuba May, who is he's about 6'5".
Okay, what is he listed at now? I'm going to look this up. He's got to be whatever he's listed at is too small. So I'm going to look this up. He's listed at 6'2", and they don't have his weight listed. There's a
Shear is a massive Chuba May fan. He was hyping him as an NFL guy before the season.
I got Chuba.
That didn't happen. Chuba's, but again, the staff likes Chuba a lot. Shear likes Chuba a lot. Chuba May, maybe the question mark of the season for U of A. Is this true, Jason Shear?
Yeah, I like it. They added size. There's Savea, Chuba, they added this guy. Zach Salupa, w'ho's like 6'7", 380.
It's a much girthier unit than they had before, for sure. Yeah. So,
well, size never hurts, for sure.
Yeah.
Is there, one more question about 2024? Because it was a little bit of a rough go, but could you pull like a highlight from last year for y'all, like a point of the season where you're like, not a single one?
Come on. There's one. I thought the Utah win was cool until we realized that Utah sucked.
Until we realized Utah stunk and they were worse than we were.
Like the first, like when Arizona beat Utah, I was like, oh man, look at Arizona, and then you realize that they stunk. But the game was cool. Other than that, no. I mean, it was because here's the thing, like these games weren't close. It'd be different if it was close, but these were, you're talking just blowouts. I mean, in like Arizona, I mean, I pulled up the schedule, like you're talking 3 touchdowns, 5 touchdowns. I mean, you win Utah because your only wins were New Mexico, NAU, Utah, and Houston.
Yeah. Yeah, and most of those games, the other ones, you were basically you were annihilated. It was now one thing that Arizona did do a really good job of last year is breaking other teams. Though when Arizona would play teams,
that is the thing.
They were never really the same after they played Arizona. Whether that was Kansas State. Kansas State basically went in the toilet after they played Arizona. Colorado never really recovered. Sure, what were some other teams that just never really recovered?
Houston.
Houston was never the same.
Blew out Houston, yeah.
I mean, yeah. So I mean, it is what it is. I mean, that's the thing. We became known for it nationally.
Yeah,
it's happening in basketball too.
Yeah, it's happening in basketball too. Yeah, we're home wreckers around here.
Yeah. Well, it's better than
yeah,
better than nothing.
Yes.
And y'all can downplay the Utah win, but I mean, listen, and maybe this is just my Mountain West sensibility, but I feel like any Saturday that Utah loses, no matter how bad they are, that's a good Saturday, honestly. So
yeah, I'm okay with that. Yeah, I was totally okay with that.
Too.